Russia's current chemical of choice is the deadliest poison on Earth, Novichok.
It's a sophisticated chemical, probably the most deadly chemical that man has ever made.
A single egg cupful of Novichok could decimate an entire city and kill 1 million people. Tonight, we'll investigate Vladimir Putin's 20-year campaign of terror that seems to know no bounds and respects no borders.
The wolf has tasted blood, and it's not going to stop. It's now on a trail.
And we'll explore Russia's latest attack, the poisoning of Putin's nemesis, opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Has Putin finally met his match? Good evening, I'm Liz Hayes, and this is Under Investigation. Trevor, what was your reaction when you saw the reports come through?
Well, I was shocked that this represented a great power undermining international law. Russia was a foundation member of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. It had purportedly destroyed all its chemical weapons by 2017 under international verification. It was supposed to have declared anything it had left over and not be engaged in this sort of activity. So if it really was Novichok by the Russians, then this would be regarded as an attack on another country by Russia against its own citizens. So that's equally bizarre.
Of course, for you, Tony, this is bollocks. You believe Salisbury and that which happened there was not the work of Russia and indeed not the work of Vladimir Putin. You believe that's the work of
British intelligence.
British intelligence?
Yes.
And the point of that would be?
Let's look at the political context. The attack took place in 2018. We were in the middle of the tumultuous Trump presidency. Oh, please stop giving me that credulous
Well, I'm
look,
sorry,
Trevor.
Tony, this is just...
We should probably have to sit in
allowed
different
to look.
places because your face just
This is
is
meant to be a
designed to
television.
distract. So anyway, just to continue with that.
No, but I want a
before
serious
I-
answer. Why on earth would Britain poison its own people?
I'm telling you, it was a determined attempt to discredit Russia and put it outside the Society of Civilized Nations. And that's exactly what's happening again now.
All right.
And the Skripal affair and now the Navalny affair are hoaxes.
The idea that a Western intelligence agency would be using chemical weapons in circumstances where the only beneficiary of the attack appears to be the Russian state is so absurd that it is possible even to discuss it, I find astounding.
How did the Russian state benefit from the Skripals?
Well, it's a useful message to potential traitors. You start working for the enemy, then this is what will ultimately happen to you. And you can see from the use of Novichok that it was us, it was the state that did it.
An innocent woman, Dawn Sturgis, was killed by Novichok at Salisbury. She sprayed herself with the poison from a contaminated perfume bottle, having no idea it had been discarded by Vladimir Putin's hit team. Others survived exposure to the poison, but suffered terribly. They included Dawn's partner, Charlie Rowley, the intended victims, Sergei and Yulia Skripal, and a local policeman, Nick Bailey.
Everything was juddering. My whole body was just dripping with sweat. I was very, very unsteady on my feet. The sweating had gone from my forehead down my back. I was confused. I didn't know what was going on, and it was really, really frightening.
Their lives were saved through intense and immediate medical treatment, assisted by the early analysis that the poison was Novichok. That was done by the UK's only chemical weapons research lab, Porton Down, which is just 10 kilometres from Salisbury. Their lives may have been saved, but they were also deeply affected. Policeman Nick Bailey would never work again, shattered physically and psychologically by the Novichok attack. There is another person who can talk about the terrible symptoms suffered by those poisoned in Salisbury. Russian opposition politician and close ally of Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was twice poisoned by a nerve agent, which he believes was Novichok.
The first thing I felt was that I was unable to breathe. And I have to say, it's very frightening as well as painful when you're trying to take in the air and you feel as if you're suffocating, as if no air is coming in. That was the first thing, both times. Then I started vomiting and sweating profusely, and the heart started racing. It just lasted for a few hours before I lost consciousness, and then I went into a coma for several days. And both times, doctors had told my wife that I had about a 5% chance to survive.
I think we all agree, maybe not on who did it, but this is an appalling way to deal with your enemies. And do you see that as a signature of the Russian agents?
I think it's also really important to understand that Vladimir Kara-Murza is a very significant figure in the Russian democratic opposition.
Another traitor he would have been seen as?
Well, he exemplifies something that Tony fails to understand, that a lot of the ways that the West has responded to Democrats in Russia, this has been provoked by people like Vladimir Kara-Murza. He lobbied. He and Navalny and many other Russian Democrats and human rights activists put pressure. They agitated. They went to the United States and said, do something. I can perfectly understand why Putin, as a deeply corrupt political leader, found that threatening.
Whatever else Vladimir Putin may be, he is a KGB man through and through, and the KGB tradition is, quote, if anyone betrays us, we kill them. We follow them to the ends of the earth.
When you have a murderous dictator who gets away with it, he'll continue to do it until he's stopped. And it's the West's duty to create consequences so he stops. And so far, the West, Western governments, have not done that.
American Bill Browder, the former head of a billion-dollar business in Russia who fell foul of the Russian regime, believes he is high on Vladimir Putin's hit list and expects any attempt on his life will involve Putin's signature, Novichok.
Well, he loves the use of poison because he can talk out of both sides of his mouth. On one side of his mouth, he can say, this has nothing to do with me. You can't prove that anybody did this because poisoning is so hard to pin down. Out of the other side of his mouth, he can say to everybody who's his enemy, look, if you cross me, you're gonna die the most horrible death from poison.
Tony, what I want to know is, you think Putin is a good guy. Is that what you're saying?
I think he's a patriotic and responsible leader of his country, yes.
Does that make him a good guy?
Look, I'm not going to get into the moral territory of what defines good and bad.
Well, that's what we're questioning here.
I'm saying he's an effective and conscientious leader of his country. I don't think one needs to go any further than that.
"68-year-old Russian President Vladimir Putin likes to be seen as a tough guy. But 3 years ago, Putin also exposed a very nasty streak. When a quiet English community became the new front line in his war against his enemies. In 2018, 2 Russian Secret Service agents travelled all the way to Salisbury in the UK to murder ex-KGB spy Sergei Skripal with Novichok, a deadly poison which only Russia possesses. They didn't care that his daughter Yulia was visiting, nor that their actions would kill an innocent member of the community and cause others to become gravely ill.
The 2 individuals named by the police and CPS are officers from the Russian Military Intelligence Service, also known as the GRU.
With just a quarter of an egg cup of Novichok hidden in a perfume container, Salisbury was devastated.
It took us 18 months to decontaminate Salisbury for a quarter of an egg cup of this stuff, because what we had to do is work out exactly where the 2 Russian agents went, exactly where Sergei Skripal and Yulia, his daughter, went, trace them, and sample almost every blade of grass they trod on in case they dropped some Novichok, and then destroy that. I think, it took 13,000 hours, 37 vehicles were buried or destroyed, and tons of rubble were taken away from Salisbury and buried or burnt.
Samples from Salisbury were tested and the presence of Novichok confirmed by a Swiss laboratory working for the International Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, which Australia supports.
It is time to stop Putin's impunity.
The Kremlin needs to learn that their crimes come with a very high price.
But to one Australian, former ambassador and diplomat to Moscow, Tony Kevin, both the Salisbury poisonings and the recent assassination attempt using Novichok against opposition leader Alexei Navalny are part of a conspiracy against Russia, concocted by Britain and its Western allies. Tony Kevin spent 30 years in the diplomatic service, but now his self-appointed mission is to rewrite public perception about Vladimir Putin and Russia's role in the poisonings.
If you accept that we're in a situation of, indeed, what is the context, what is the motive, who did it? And the way in which both of you, I'm sorry, rushed to the conclusion that Russia must have done it, to me just smacks of brainwashing. You've both been brainwashed.
Well, Tony, they're both Russian. In both cases, they're Russian citizens, and you're suggesting the United Kingdom would kill one of its own citizens and maim people and put the whole city of Salisbury at risk?
Can I continue?
Like, is it the United Kingdom that did it?
Well, okay, you've asked the question.
So tell us, who do you think did it?
I'll answer the question. What was done to the Skripals was not an attempt to kill them.
What was it? What was it?
What happened to the Skripals was designed to make it look like Novichok. Everything that the British did afterwards was designed to make it look like Novichok, so they put a lot of fresh Novichok in just to make sure that the stupid scientists in Switzerland did not miss it.
Tony Kevin believes that British intelligence MI6 doctored the samples from Salisbury, having actually carried out the attack themselves, using a nerve agent created in the nearby UK Chemical Weapons Research Laboratory, Porton Down.
It was by British scientists at Salisbury Weapons Lab, which was conveniently just down the road. The
fact that it's down the road, is that actually a reason, the geographical location of something? Do you think they wouldn't have the brains to actually, if that was a clue, that they could have done it somewhere else?
You know, I think one of the most ridiculous things coming out of the Russian press was that Prime Minister May had made the Novichok in Porton Down, the defence laboratory here. The accusation is crazy. We have all the evidence. We have the two Russian GRU agents who we tracked from Heathrow down here to Salisbury twice and back again. We have copies of their passports.
While the Novichok attack on Salisbury was a terrifying wake-up call for Western countries that a chemical attack could happen on our doorstep, in reality, one already had 12 years before. This time, it involved the deadly radioactive poison polonium-210, made in nuclear power stations.
Polonium-210 is a very, very rare isotope. They reckon it's about $1 million a drop. So who else is going to be able to get hold of this stuff?
In 2006, an ex-KGB spy living in London, Alexander Litvinenko, met two Russians posing as businessmen in an upmarket hotel. The pair were actually agents for the GRU, Russia's military intelligence service. They slipped a tiny amount of polonium-210 into Litvinenko's tea.
He was suffered so badly. He couldn't eat, he couldn't drink. It was constant pain.
Alexander Litvinenko's wife, Marina, watched her beloved Sasha, as she called him, suffer for 23 days. Doctors having no idea what was killing him until the very end.
We know at the end Sasha was poisoned only because Sasha survived for 23 days. And it was last day when he was checked and polonium was discovered. We now know it was polonium.
there was evidence to show that was polonium and that Russian agents were responsible for that. Do you accept that?
Yeah, I don't dispute that narrative.
And how do you feel about that then?
Oh, I haven't really thought about how I feel about it. I mean, I believe it probably happened in the way in which Marina has just described, and I feel very sorry for her and for her family.
That's the Russian state poisoning its own on foreign soil.
There were stories that Litvinenko was engaged in trying to subvert other Russians.
But the way in which it was dealt with is what we're talking about. That's not acceptable.
No, it's not acceptable. It's dirty stuff.
Sure, but dirty stuff has been happening, and Vladimir Putin has been a party to that too.
So I don't know whether Vladimir Putin was a party to it. I don't even know whether the Russian government was a party to it, Liz.
I think there was evidence, though, that this was the work of the Russian state.
The operation was probably approved by Mr. Patrushev, then head of the FSB, and also by President Putin.